Okay, so the recording has begun. Again, if you are not a presenter, I am going to request that you mute your video as well as your microphone. If you unmute it, and I'm finding there to be some sort of feedback or anything that would take away from the panel discussion, I will mute your video and microphone for you. Um, we have, I'm going to give it just about 2 more minutes before we officially begin the program. My name is Jen Park, and I am the Community Engagement and Talent Development Specialist at Ramapo Catskill Library System. Again, if you are joining us, please leave your video muted and leave your microphone muted. Today's session has a large number of attendees. We have a high number of attendees. So during the session, if you do find that you have any comments or questions, you are welcome to place your comments in the chat box. Please hold your questions until prompted. Our moderator, Emily Dowie, will be providing you with information as to how the Q&A will run. If you find that you have any difficulties with BlueJeans at any time during this session, or you need any clarification, anything that I can assist with, you may reach me via chat box via, you can direct message me. You are welcome to email me. I'll be monitoring my email, and you are also welcome to call me. I will have my video and my microphone off. So at this time, it's about 10:03, and I want to make sure we provide adequate time for such an important conversation. So on behalf of RCLS, I welcome everyone to today's session. We are thrilled to be a supporter of this panel discussion. And I'm going to turn it over to Emily Dowie, who's Teen Librarian at Pearl River. So thank you, Emily. I'm going to hand it off to you, and I'm going to be monitoring the attendees. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to panel discussion, Librarians of Color and Diversity in Libraries. In addition to being the Teen Librarian at Pearl River Library, I also run the RCLS Coalition for Library Workers of Color. So I think this is a very important discussion that we're starting. So I want to introduce the panelists. Taina Evans, she works for the Brooklyn Public Library and currently oversees library services within 10 Brooklyn locations. She is the outgoing chair of the RSS Library Services to Aging Population Committee of Reference and User Services Association. She is active in both Library Services to Person with Print Disabilities Committee and Consumer Health and Information Librarians Interest Group of Association of Specialized Government and Cooperation in Cooperative Libraries Agencies, and also involved in New York Library Association. As an adjunct professor within the Division of Library and Information Science program at St. John's University, Mrs. Evans teaches a course in collection development and management. Sandra Eckles. Sandra Michelle Eckles has quite a diverse array of experience in education, but what unifies her professional philosophy as a librarian and scholar is a commitment to seeing and serving whole individuals. Sandra is the immediate past president of the New York Black Librarians Caucus, serving an extended term, 2015-2018, and is currently pursuing an Ed.D. in Educational Leadership with a concentration in higher education from the Caulfield School of Education at St. Peter's University. She holds a Master of Library Science from St. John's University, as well as a Master of Science in Fundraising and Grant Making from New York University. She earned 2 degrees concurrently while also working full-time and is a single mother with 3 children. Richard Ashby Jr. Mr. Richard Ashby Jr. is the director of the Public Library in McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, co-founder and director of LiteracyNation, and president of the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. He became a librarian to make a difference in the lives of everyone he meets. Librarianship has helped him reach his goals and live his dreams. His amazing journey, however, did not begin as a librarian, although his mother told him he would probably become one. Thank you so much to the panelists. I really appreciate them joining this panel with me. So let's get started. Where are all the Black librarians and librarians of color?
Sprinkled throughout all the systems across the country. According to the last survey done, 88% of librarians are white and 12% are people of color. Of that 12%, 7% are Black librarians. So I like to say that we're sprinkled throughout all the different systems across the country.
I'd like to say that I agree with Sandra so much. And they're also, let's use a baseball analogy. They're also in the bullpen. They're support staff. They are on the fringe of becoming librarians. They have to be encouraged and supported by the system. I started out as a security guard in the library. A lot of the Black librarians are still in the bullpen. They're in the oven. They are being baked, and it's up to us to make sure they're cultivated and encouraged to become librarians.
But do you think they're getting that support?
No, they're
Not
not
at all.
getting.
Not in
at
the
all.
least bit.
I went to
I have to agree.
yeah. I went to a panel discussion on Long Island a couple of years ago, and the question was, why aren't Black librarians being hired for leadership? Or why? And it was it was ridiculous. And so I asked the question, how many people here have the ability to hire librarians and librarians director? And everyone white raised their hand. And they were the administrators, they were the board. And I said, so why are we here with this discussion? You're asking us, why aren't you hiring us? How ridiculous. Stop giving these programs to make yourself look good and feel better. Why are you asking me why you're not hiring me? You know.
I agree with Richard on that. From my experience, I came into the world of librarianship as a career changer. I was working in nonprofit organizations for many, many years, and I had a strong background at that time in youth development. So at that time, Queensborough Public Library decided that they wanted to open up the first teen library, and they didn't want librarians to head it. So I came in as a non-professional, as a youth counselor, where I opened up the first teen space in Far Rockaway that was totally digital, no books, and successfully managed that. And I had a successful career at Queens Library, but it wasn't easy. My career trajectory was not easy at all. I came in with a lot of skills. I came in without being a librarian, but while there, I availed myself, I have this insatiable appetite for learning, so I availed myself to a full scholarship that was being offered through IMLS and St. John's University, and then I became a librarian while I was working there. That trajectory still wasn't easy. My leadership positions did not come without scars. And I say scars because physical scars and mental scars. It's just not easy for a woman of color, or if you like to say, for lack of a better term, a Black woman who is highly intelligent, has a lot of skills, but you're being pitted against your white colleagues. And where your white colleagues can successfully transition into careers, into different positions, you have to earn your position 10 times higher. Like, you would need to prove yourself 10 times higher. So I like to say that I didn't get to where I'm at today without having scars. Now, does the scars define me? No, they don't define me, but they're there to remind me of how hard I had to work to get to what I have today. And case in point, I can put it out there. I was up for a position, and actually 2 positions. The first position I was up for, I was told by HR, similar to what Richard went through, that I couldn't receive a 30% increase. They couldn't quantify giving me a 30% increase. Although I had the skill set at that point, at that time, 2 master's degrees. So there was no reason, and the leadership skills. I had been in management for many, many years prior to coming to the library. But they couldn't see taking my salary and giving me a 30% increase. So they hired someone else from the outside. That was one situation. The next situation was I was thrusted into a position because of the grant writing skills. That's always been my catalyst to take me to if people ask me, what is it that sets you apart from from other librarians of color, is that I have that second master's in philanthropy and fundraising. It not only sets me apart from other librarians of color, it actually sets me apart from most of my colleagues in the field, because grant writing skills is something that everyone is looking for today. But 10 years ago, it was something that no one had, and I came in with it, and it was something that really took me to the next place. So the next position that I got a scar from was that I was thrusted into a position of interim program manager for the adult literacy program, where in that program, my manager suddenly passed away. But the reason I received the position was because of the grant writing skills. So successfully writing grants for the adult education department at Queens Library, successfully wrote the grants. But when it came time, when Queens decided to do a reorganization, they created a new title, and a new title for the role that I had been in as interim program manager for 13 months, receiving a $1,500 a month stipend, which was less money than my white counterpart who was running a similar program. I had to interview for my assistant director position and go against people in the trenches that I supervised, whereas my white counterpart was given her title as assistant director of her department. So, wow. Yeah, wow. So the disparities start at the top. So we got to look at our boards. Having my master's in philanthropy and fundraising, I must say, it's the board of trustees who can bring it down to the CEOs, who then take it down to the HR. But HR is the most, I don't want to go exactly what I want to say about most HR departments, but the majority of HR departments are very insensitive to people's skills. And, in the words of Martin Luther King, take me for my content of my character and my skill set. Don't look at my skin color. My skin color has nothing to do with my intellectual abilities.
Very good. That's good. So me, I've never spent one day as a librarian, as a professional librarian. I've always been a director. I started out as a security guard in the library. They promoted me to be a custodian, if that's a promotion. And it was a brand new library out on Long Island. So I did many things. I worked behind the children's desk, the circulation desk. They let me do a lot of things. And after being there 15 years as a page, a glorified page, there was a fight in the library, and with two young people, about 9 and 10, a boy and a girl. It was in February, Black History Month, all white staff, and they could not break the fight up or get the fight calmed down. And I walked over and I said, "What's going on?" And the little girl was crying, and the little boy looked terrified. And the girl said the young man called him a name, two black kids. And so I said, "What name did you call her?" No one would tell me. And finally I said, "What name did you call her?" And the little girl said, "He called me a Negro." And the white librarians, they were in shock. And I said, "Oh, you called her a Negro?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, why did you call her a Negro?" He said, "Right here in the book, it says Dr. Martin Luther King marched with the other Negroes." I said, "Oh, that's fine. I was a Negro." And they said, "You were a Negro?" I said, "I was a Negro. I've been called a boy. I've been called the N-word. I've been called an African American, and now I'm called black. I don't know what you'll be called when you grow up." Right then and there, the librarian got furious. They told me to get off the floor. I was not a librarian. I had no business telling those kids that. And I said, "Well, I may not be a librarian, but I've been black for about 40 years now. That should have that." And I went back and I told the trustees who were black what happened, and they told me, "Get out of the office. We don't want to hear from you. You have been in this library for over 15 years. You've never done anything with yourself. You're always complaining about the white librarians. If you want to do something, if you want to hear us, go back to school and become a librarian." I went to Queens College, and I didn't know much about what it was, and they asked me what did I want to be, what type of librarian I wanted to be. And I said, I want to be a director. And they said, Oh, no, 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 no. You have to be a public librarian, a school librarian, academic librarian, a law librarian. What discipline do you want? And I said, I don't know. I want to be a director. And I told them the story of what happened. And I said, I want to be a director because I want to be able to be a mover and shaker in the libraries. And they said, no, that'll never happen, son. You have to get your library degree first. And about 5 to 8 years later, you become a director. Fine. I want to be a public librarian. Went to school, received my degree. 3 months later, I got sick, cancer, stayed out for 3 months, came back to work. They offered me the job as the director of the library. And I've been the director of a library ever since. So I have a different track. Took the director's job, didn't know A from B, but taught myself, used the network of the Black Librarians Caucus, called all type of librarians that were directors before, just fed off of them. They mentored me. That's how I got to be library director. But as a director, I've been like the only Black director in a lot of places, and you're not treated right. You're minimized. You're marginalized. They don't want to hear what you have to say. I was the only Black director in Delaware County in Pennsylvania, and I was put on every committee you could think of. I was invited to every lunch you could think of, and I knew why I was there. I was a dark-skinned Black man, and I fit the mold. This is who we need at the table, and I shook things up. I shook things up, and I tried to make a difference. But that's just my story. There's 1,000 stories out there where people did their due diligence, did their work, did their time, and they're still not getting paid. Like Michelle, they're still not getting paid. They're still not getting promoted. You can sit at a table. You can sit at the table with your white counterparts, and you can come up with an idea, and no one says anything. And 5 minutes later, Mary Beth says the same thing you said, and it's like, oh wow, what a great idea! You're like, wait a minute, did I just say that? And these are the things that happen to Black librarians and librarians of color. We're marginalized. Our ideas are stolen. It's just.
So, yeah, I just want to jump in and talk a little bit about where the Black librarians are and then my trajectory. So when I got into librarianship, this was about 2007, there were a lot more opportunities. I don't know, it was right before the budget crisis and the Great Recession hit. So there were upward mobilities for BIPOC, so that's Black, Indigenous, people of color, within the cities. So New York Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, Queens Public Library, they all had like this whole growth of hiring. And you really got to see in varying institutions ways that librarians can work, promote social justice, and really on a librarian level, you're able to kind of have the autonomy to push programs, story times, initiatives that's all geared towards the community that you're trying to serve. And you can do it in diverse ways without much ramifications for your decisions. But then as you start to network, and in my case, I was networking with New York Black Librarian Caucus at the time. I was on the scholarship committee. You start to hear about other institutions and how other librarians are experiencing their role through their institution. So as a frontline level librarian, I felt like I didn't really experience some of the institutionalized racism until I went for, similar to Sandra, promotional opportunities, and where there was a sudden influx of librarians who began becoming supervisors in 2 years within being in an institution, outpacing librarians who were in the institution for over 7 years or 8 years or 9 years giving back. And I couldn't quite understand why some of my supervisors at the time had to go and petition in order to have supervisory roles. It wasn't enough that they did it for 10 years. It's like someone came in 2 years, they became a supervisor. So that's when I started to realize that this was an institutional and structural uh, dynamic in where there were limited upward mobility for a lot of the librarians, right? So then I began to kind of branch out. I was already a part of New York Black Librarian Caucus, and then I became a part of ALA. And that's when, it was a realization that the profession had, and I wasn't a Spectrum Scholar, but I had a lot of friends who was in the Spectrum Scholarship Program. The profession was trying to cultivate ways to bring people into librarianship to diversify the field. But I realized since 2010, I got my degree in 2009, but since 2010, there hasn't been much movement within the profession. And so it's now becomes a structural racism dynamic within ALA. And then you have your institutions that promote and perpetuate those racism structures. And then you have the individual who now have to compete with what's structurally created in order to kind of find your way. So when you ask the question, like, where are Black librarians? A lot of them kind of go into out of the profession in order to kind of feel valued because they're seeing their either their white counterpart or someone else, get into the positions that they have been working hard for. In addition, some of the libraries, are more public facing and really provide a contact and democratic ideals on the public website. But internally, there isn't really a celebration of the historic contribution of many of the Black librarians that have laid the groundwork. And Richard mentioned earlier, stealing the ideas. There's many rooms that I personally have been a part of in where I say something in a board meeting or in a group meeting or in a committee meeting, and 10 minutes into the meeting, someone who may be a white person of leadership says the same exact thing, and everyone's like, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I question myself, like, did I not explain it in the same way? Did I use too many words? And and you're constantly second guessing your ideas into where you're backed up and then decide that you're not going to even express the ideas because when it's and it recently happened during the reopening phase, but when you create these engagement plans and then someone say, what, I think my engagement plan is great because yours is a foundation, but mine is a framework. And you're like, wait a minute, it's the same thing, but you just use a different language or put a pretty chart to it. I didn't use a graphic designer to kind of convey my ideas, but it's still, relevant. So when you're in a position where you feel like you're undervalued or where your work is only diminished to the New York Black Librarian Caucus, and I will, this will be the last point before you move on to the next question, but I remember I wanted to be a part of RAS, which is the Reference Adult Services Division in New York Black Librarian Caucus, and the president at the time said, why don't you go over there to the New York Black Librarian Caucus? They can really use your help. And this is just like, within a conference where I'm being directed and told where I can make the best of my contributions. So when you're dealing with, the levels of like where you're second guessing yourself as an individual, and then institutionally you're not recognized for the contribution, and then structurally, you're being placed and pigeonholed into areas where they feel that you can make the best contribution. The Black librarians decide that maybe this is a field where I should kind of take a step back and maybe take the lead somewhere else. A lot goes into city government.
Yeah.
Concur.
So, yeah. So our voices are being ignored, and the racism and discrimination that we're experiencing is essentially pushing us out and also stopping us from succeeding. And meanwhile, because of what's happening recently with George Floyd's death, many librarians are starting a conversation about racism, which includes reading books about anti-racism. But my question is, how are we actually going to tackle systemic racism in librarianship? Because as Richard was saying before, before we actually started this panel, reading books isn't enough, because if you're actually a racist or you have racism in you, reading a book isn't necessarily going to help.
Our shelves are complete with books that are written by the oppressor, by racist sentiments, that honors the viewpoints and the point of view from white writers. Our archives are told, our newspapers were told from the white person's perspectives. The history that we share with our public is from the point of view that doesn't honor trans lives, Black lives, Indigenous lives, Hispanic lives. And so when you're starting from that deficit, right, and then you say, well, if you read this book, you will be a better person, you again diminish the work and the accountability that an individual will need in order to make the connection and really delve into the experiences of their Black colleagues or their BIPOC colleagues. I'm sorry, Michelle, you was going to say something?
I was just going to say, as Michael Jackson has said, take a look at yourself, the man in the mirror, right? Everyone has a responsibility to look at themselves. You cannot look at someone else without looking at yourself. I feel that racism is taught. It runs historically through families, and it's taught more so on a subliminal level in some households, and in some households it's taught at the dinner table. This is how you treat a person, right? And that's just how it's taught in the household. So here we are today, 2020. I feel like we just revisited. A lot of people are now calling the civil rights 2.0. I feel personally, being a child that was born in the 1960s and listening to my mother's story and listening to my grandmother's stories, I feel personally that racism has never went anywhere. I'm like Richard. We became numb because in the 1970s, Black people were given a little more. You were able to buy homes. You know, I watched my aunts and my uncles who were daycare center providers and worked for sanitation, city government, buy their first homes in the 1970s and the 80s. So I feel like as a collective body of people, a lot of us became numb to the things, and especially if you live in major cities, racism is so covert. You know, it's done subliminal. You get in positions, especially in librarianship. I've been in positions where you had to deal with micro assault, microaggressions, you know, and it's just done. And as Taina said earlier, it's language, right? People need to change their language. Case in point, Taina and I was talking earlier, and I was like, you know, I remember attending a NYLA conference, and a white colleague who had heard about all the great work that I was doing in Long Island City, Queens, came up to me and said, hey, I want to come over and I'm going to come to Long Island City and I want to pick your brain. And like literally I saw stars, because at that juncture in my career, I had worked really hard to build up the career that I did with outreach and things of that nature in the Long Island City community. And for my colleague to look at me and say, I'm coming over to pick your brain. That language right there sent like chills down my spine. And I don't know what came over me, but I literally gave her a Black history lesson in 60 seconds and said, do you actually know what the word picking means to some people? To some Black people, what picking means, especially if they grew up in the rural South? They heard the stories of, I said, we have been picked over, picked at, and had to pick up after people in order to get any place in life. And so for me, the conversation needs to be, if I have a white colleague that want to go out to have a cup of coffee, let's go have a cup of coffee. Or let's go, can we come over and have a brainstorming session? So I feel like the language in librarianship needs to change. I've worked in a public library like Richard. I wasn't like on the reference desk. I managed to take my skill sets and transfer them and bring them into different positions. But I've also been an academic assistant dean in an academic library. And let me tell you something. The racism in public librarianship is a lot more tolerable and bearable than the racism that you receive in academia. So that's a whole nother concept and story on, but it's 10 times more. You deal with more racism in academia than you do in public librarianship. Oh, yes. And on that note, Richard, take it over.
Okay. I love you to death, but we're not gonna get into who's being treated worse. Racism is bad wherever you are.
Right, it is, but it's worse in
So,
academia.
standing at the front desk a couple of years ago, I was in the library. We had a summer program, and we had the kids. We had like a pool in the front yard of the library. White guy comes in and he says, I'd like to speak to the director. And I'm at the front desk, and I said, what would you like? He said, I didn't ask you. I asked to speak to the director. And the staff is like, ooh. So I said, well, I'm trying to help you. What would you like? He said, listen, son, I want to speak to the director. I said, well, okay. I looked to the girl next to me, one of my staff members. I said, the director's on the phone. I said, the director's busy right now. In about 3 minutes, can you go get him? And she knew I was going back to my office. I went back, I sat in my office, and he came in and he knocked on the door. He knocked on the door. I said, come in. He's like, you're the director? I said, yes, I'm the director, and get the hell out of my building. I know I was wrong, but I was done. I was done. And you could be you could be standing in the library next to a white page, someone that puts away books, and they'll walk in and they'll ask that person a question before they ask you. I purposely go to work clean, shirt, tie, clips, hand cufflinks, as dressed up as I can be, just to set myself apart. And they will walk past me to a white person in jeans, in a t-shirt, and ask them a question. And when you try to answer them, they're like, I was talking to him. I was talking to her. Okay, and you get that, and you get that a lot. But in the field of librarianship, like everyone's been saying, the ideas are stolen. Just last week, my boss called me up and she's like, Richard, I need you to come with me to a meeting with a major donor. Now my library is owned by a nonprofit, so we deal totally with money. And I'm the I know why I'm there. I'm there so I can show up at meetings and they can say they're not racist. So we're at this meeting and this donor is telling us all the things he's going to do for the Black community. And I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And I'm sitting there looking at him and in Zoom. And she says, what do you think, Mr. Ashby? I said, I think you're totally clueless. And I can hear my boss like, these are major donors. I said, you're coming to this community and you're telling us what you can do for us. How about asking us what we want, what we need, what are our needs? You're not Santa Claus. Don't bring us presents. Even Santa Claus, you get to tell Santa Claus what you want by writing him a letter. So you're telling me what you're going to do for the Black community for us to feel better. And he said, oh my God, you're right. I've been doing this for a long time. He said, you know what, I want to apologize. How can we do this? I said, let's put out some surveys. Let's have some focus groups. Let's talk to the community and find out what the community needs. And he was like, wonderful idea, Mr. Ashby. Do you know less than 2 hours later, we're at a meeting with the stakeholders. This woman says, well, at the meeting today, I explained to him that he can't come here and tell us what we want. She took exactly what I said and twisted it. And I said, excuse me, Miss Haynes, isn't that exactly what I told the man today at the meeting? She said, the man? I said, yeah, the man with the money, the man, as we would say it in the hood. And she's like, oh, you know what, Richard, I'm so sorry you did say that. I was wondering how I got that idea. Then she emailed me later, don't ever embarrass me again like that. I said, don't ever steal my idea again. But this is what they do. And they're comfortable with it.
And I also want to add, with in terms of books is the discovery phase, right? It's not the solution. What are institutions doing to kind of implement, operationalize what was learned from those books, and what are the assessments so that we can make sure, and just speaking about academia, like what are the assessments that we are doing to kind of know that what was learned is really going to be, again, embedded in what we do as an institution or within the field. I feel like, going to the diversity committee, OLOS and ALA had the well-meaning intention, but if it's not implemented to the 300,000 libraries across the United States, then where are we? And again, just seeing within 10 years that there hasn't been any movement in the field, and just visiting the last ALA conference where they said that our new direction is justice. And, I think that for a person of color and me, you know, just hearing the word justice is like, but we have been talking about justice. Do we need to have a Black executive director of ALA to tell us that justice is there? Or is it because we're in the new civil rights era that we now have to do a reawakening? And you know, and I sit with this just position that I don't want to talk anymore, but at the same time, who's going to be the voice? Who's going to say it? And I get asked by a couple of people, well, it shouldn't be left for the Black, Indigenous person of color to be the one to tell our white counterpart that they're doing something wrong. But I can attest otherwise. It is important, and it is the work. It is the work of a person of color, and that's the burden that I feel like we have to inform and to instruct and to make the claim and state that your intent has caused harm. And the impact of that is that you continue to create systems that allows this group to be marginalized over and over and over again. And we have the best meaning and intentions to provide free books and resources. Can you imagine a place where we have democratic ideas to provide free books and resources and still have to deal with the structural racism that is embedded into the institution? It's too many fronts. But, you know, I think the work is really to kind of speak up at every level. And I thank you, Richard, for telling her, don't steal my ideas. You know, don't, and you know, I'm an adjunct professor as well, and you do see that some departments get looked at and overlooked, maybe because there's too many people of color in that one, or the ones that are easily cut from the budget.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, so what the point that you and Sandra had made is, I think you have made also, I've seen the most eloquent statements about inequity and inclusion and how are you going to implement it? Everyone is putting out these wonderful flowery statements about equity and inclusion, how you're welcomed here and everything. How are you going to implement it? How are you going to make it come around? And here's the thing that people don't understand, and that Black people have no power to implement this. We can only bring it to the forefront. We can only say you need to change, but we don't have any power we're not in the position globally or a majority of the positions to make this happen. So then again, we still have to go to the person and say, you're doing us wrong, and it has to be a change of heart. Now, there was a book I used to read as a kid. I loved the book. It came from the title. It came from one of the lines of Langston Hughes' poem at the end. It says, "Night coming tenderly, black like me." Have you ever read the book Black Like Me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
When a white man gets his skin pigmented and he becomes black, and he travels the South, and he sees what it is to be a black man, to walk in the shoes, and his eyes are opened. I think, and there's all type of movies of when the black man, but the Watermelon Man, when he wakes, you know, there's all type of movies of when somebody's race has changed overnight or some kind of way, and then you get to see how the other person is living.
Right. There's a letter from our colleagues, the Concerned Black Workers of the Free Library of Philadelphia.
Yes.
Right, and they're trying to put their voices out there so that you can kind of see the experience that they're going through. And I don't know if because, you know, a couple of media outlets took it on, that they're kind of seeing this perspective of what's happening. But I think that is the way to leverage staff voices and be vocal, and to kind of have someone read the shared experience. So it's one thing to put a book and say, read this book, but no, why don't you read the experiences from the voices of the staff that are there, and kind of, sit with that discomfort and have an understanding of what your institution has normalized and what you guys need to do. Like Richard said, we're not in the position to kind of make those changes because we have been left out of the room so many times. We need you.
Do you think they're ready for it, honestly? Do you think the collective body that sits at the top are really, truly, truly ready for it, with the institutional racism that we focus? Emily, your next question?
Hello?
Well, actually,
Hi. Hello?
Hey.
Hi.
Could you just mute yourself? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay. Sorry about that. So actually, Sandra, what you just said, your question, I don't think the people at the top are ready to hear all that pain of the people who have been of the people of color who have been suffering all the collective racism. But that actually leads into my next question, which is, and it's kind of been what we've been discussing, that is it for POC to educate white librarians, supervisors, administrators, etc., about the racism and discrimination they've been facing? Because in many instances, we have to do the talking and the educating, or let people know that we're when we're offended. But how can our colleagues take that burden off of us? Because personally, I don't really think it's fair that we have to educate the people that we're working with about racism.
Exactly. So here's a thing, a blind test. You know, they in marketing, they use blind tests, right? So if you had resumes that was submitted blindly for a position, and you didn't know who the person was, didn't know the color, content, you didn't know anything about this person, you just looked at what was on paper and what was skills. So if, people in leadership should do the blind test and really just accept people for their skills and their talents and their abilities and what they're bringing to the table. But there's such a huge disconnect. And it goes back to when librarianship was formed in the 1930s. It was formed during a time in American history. If you go back to what was happening in American history, when librarianship became professionalized. And I always think about the movie Hidden Figures. When in Hidden Figures, when she needed this book to help her get better in her career, that she literally went to the white library and literally had to steal this book that helped her be able to remain relevant and competitive in her field. And I just feel like we've been those characters that's in Hidden Figures so much in librarianship. We can take we can belong to all the committees. We can take all the right courses. We can present till we're blue in our faces or whatever color you want to be, but you can present and present and present. I mean, my CV, I've been presenting since 2008, right? Conferences. But the thing about it is that we collectively do not have, as Richard said, that voice to make the change. We're here on this panel, and I know a lot of people are great to hear what we're talking about, but still, when you take it back, who makes the changes in it? Are they willing? My question again is, are they willing to make the change?
I know we're going to open this up soon for Q&A, and it's hard for me to see the chat, and I want to respond to all. I do want to say that I agree. I believe, and I know the panelists disagree, I believe that it is the responsibility of the person of color to kind of talk about the impacts that is happening. But I also want to add that it is the role of the institution to do the anti-racism work and make a commitment for the long-term anti-racism work. So being a good director isn't about putting something on someone's table. Being a good director is making sure that annually, just like we have to take the sexual harassment mandate because of the Me Too movement, annually we should be taking what is anti-racism one-on-one. I have been told as early as last week, that they don't know what BIPOC means. That is the language, right? When you want to be identified by something and someone don't even know what to call you, saying something as simple as someone's name affirms that you were listening. And if you don't know that Black, Indigenous, person of color is the term that is used by, by a couple of organizations that are thinking about how to address the people that are impacted, then that's some foundational work that an institution needs to commit to. I think that they're ready to listen. Some changes that I don't think that they're ready for is racial discrimination.
Yes.
I don't think we're in a position to kind of address racial discrimination or racial harassment from our patrons. The de facto, or we told a line between what's good customer service and kind of going into the back room and ignoring that someone is calling you a racial slur. It's something that is like the de facto, it's just good customer service not to argue with the patron even though they called you out your name or they called you out of your character or they misidentify you. I don't think that the institution are truly ready to diversify the workplace, but they are open. I think a lot more are open to the idea of diversifying the workforce as, some of the low-hanging fruits. But it really starts with the institution really thinking about what is the anti-racist work is for them and how they can really create long-term impact, and not because, there's sweeping change within NYPD. And I know, Richard, you're in Philadelphia, so I don't know what changes are there, or because there's a Black Lives Matter mural downtown Brooklyn, right? It's because that they really are committed to the voices and they really want to hear what their staff are going through. Because after the 9 to 5, when we go home, we are still a person of color that have to walk through the same streets, right? And if you don't think that your staff have some trauma related to any of that, then you really are towing the line of being tone deaf and really not, you're out of touch with not only the public, but what your staff is experiencing.
Yes. Yes. So true.
Yes, anti-racism, Taina couldn't have said it better. Anti-racism 101. Maybe Everfi, the company that puts out all the trainings for diversity and anti-bullying, perhaps they will pick that up.
Yeah, and someone put in something in the chat. We could be paid for this work. I'm not saying, just the emotional labor and emotional toll needs to be on the person of color, because that is emotional work to kind of tell someone how they have impacted you. Quantifying that and saying, listen, do you have a budget to treat us as consultants rather than consulting out to these agencies to kind of tell us what the racial inequities are within our institution? You can pay a committee that can talk about the point of view of the person of color. So I'm not trying to say that it's all just free labor because you give us a paycheck. Let me add some context to what I'm trying to say as well. But also, but making sure that we are decision makers and also randomizing who's a part of that decision maker. Don't always call on the same person of color because that's the person in the room.
Yeah, that's so true. And sometimes it's hard for them to hear from us what they're doing wrong. Because then it becomes, when I tell you what you've done wrong to me or what you're doing wrong, then it becomes, the issue becomes skewed. Now you bringing your personal feelings, into it, and now you want to start crying and sobbing and all this kind of silliness.
Or become the aggressive Black woman, as when you're vocal and you're speaking up, you're termed as, the term is you're aggressive, and I'm not being aggressive at any time. I'm being assertive, and just at the least being assertive, speaking my truth, and letting you know that what you said to me was offensive. And, and sometimes when you try to tell your white counterparts something that they said was offensive, then automatically the gates go up with them against you. They're like, oh, what do you mean? What do you mean?
They become so defensive, and you deal with that white fragility. If anyone read that book, you deal with that. And then you come up with the power dynamic between someone who is your supervisor and who you're trying to speak truth to power to. And then they come up on the defense like, you hurt me. And now you're trying to explain yourself for hurting someone for hurting you.
And it becomes a vicious cycle. It becomes a vicious cycle. But, I really feel that, there needs to be, like you said, anti-racism 101, but then we also need etiquette training. Like, how do you just treat the other person? Like, I just feel like etiquette training is not there. We need to be, it needs to be some etiquette training. How do you treat another person?
Mm-hmm.
So like I was saying before we came on, so so you look at the Black bookstores, the independent bookstores, They are selling out of books on racism. They are selling out, and people are buying these books and then selling them again for exorbitant prices. But like I was telling my the panel before we came on, my boss had a nerve to put these books on my desk about racism. I don't need to read about racism, lady. I know about racism. Like I was telling you, I'm a cancer survivor, and when I was diagnosed with cancer, I read everything I could on cancer and the cancer I had. And when I finished reading, I still had cancer. So what? I still had it. I had to do something about it. I had to get it eradicated from my body. I needed an operation. I needed a checkup from the neck up. I needed the whole 9 yards. So you're not going to be racist for 30, 20, 10 years, 15 years. You're not going to be a racist and read about racism. And then all of a sudden, at the end of your third book, oh my God, I'm no longer racist. Hallelujah. Oh, you're still racist. What is now? You're an informed racist. That's the difference.
It's ongoing work. Like, they have to understand it's an ongoing thing. I mean, there's a lot of microaggressions that happen with all races. And once you identify that and know that, you got to catch yourself. But the problem is they don't know, like, microaggression is just what it is, so subvert that you don't even know that you're doing it. But it's ongoing work. You're probably going to do it for the rest of your life, because America is just built on this in structure that we're constantly competing against. Our president, our current president, like, how do you put a tweet out with someone saying white power for 3 hours and then just say, oh, I didn't know that it was there, right? And then you're having dialogue, and I'm not trying to make this about politics, but it's just that, like we're constantly surrounded by it, that you just can't read 3 chapters. Like, it's going to be ongoing, because that's just where we live and where we are.
So somebody in the chat said something very interesting. They said, "What about the gatekeepers, the black people who are gatekeepers? Where is that statement at? That is so perfect, and you have them. Please find it."
Oh, I can speak on them on the gatekeepers. I mean, I don't think that's there, Richard, but I know what you mean by saying.
Okay, he said, "What about other people of color who are the gatekeepers for the establishment?" Oh, Lord, have mercy. This is the family show, so we really can't think. The gatekeepers, the ones, the black people, the people of color that you see in LA walking with their white counterparts.
There it is, Juanita.
Don't want to speak to you, don't want to recognize that you are there. I mean, how many times I've been in LA and I've seen somebody black walking with 5 and 6 white people, and you speak to them and they act like they don't see you, or they're like, want to keep, stop it. You're there on the shoulders of other black people. You are not white. You can surround yourself with as many white people as you want to surround yourself with, but you better believe that you're black, and you'll notice that you're black. And don't get it twisted. Just because you think you're being accepted, it ain't gonna last long.
Richard,
okay?
Don't you think that is also a situation where it's still perpetrated from the people at the top, because they only let one in? And I don't like to say that. I don't like to say the term "let one in," but it's because it's always one. There's always one person that becomes the star or the superstar or the touted one at a particular organization. I feel as though there are many. They're not just one. Some people are more, as you said earlier, you're a mover and shaker, where some people have sat back and watched collectively and still have a lot that they can contribute to the overall conversation. But it still goes back to the real gatekeepers who only allow in one, and they take that one and feel that they're grooming that one person. I mean, I've been in that position of being that one and being surrounded, but you're in this club. And when you get there, it all still boils down to the person themselves, as we've been talking about, and Taina has said too. It's like I said in the beginning, take a look at yourself in the mirror, right? The man in the mirror. You have to be comfortable with who you are in order to, just move through the spaces that have been collectively put together for us. It's your comfortability. You have to become very, very comfortable in who you are, And that those are, and we are a few that shining stars that shine out, but we still collectively as people of color and what we go through, but at the same time, at the end of the day, it's who accepts who and who are at the top. The gatekeepers at the top will accept someone who's radical, someone who has their presentation skills may not be eloquent enough or may not be soft enough that it won't ruffle a lot of feathers. That might be the person that gets through the gate.
That's right.
Right?
Or the right skin shade, the right color of their skin.
That's a whole nother conversation. But just overall, collectively, you still got to go back to the people at the top. So the leadership at the top, change starts at the top. We can bring it to the leadership, but the change with racism and librarianship, it starts at the top. But if you want to take it back even further, it starts in our programs in school. As an adjunct professor, I'm oftentimes teaching students who are all white, and I am challenged so much in my discussion boards after they do an internet search, find me and look at my CV, and they're like, oh wow, oh wow. And then they will come back with questions that's deemed on not related to the coursework, but related to who I am, the work that I've done in my career. So again, it starts, so if we're gonna make changes, anti-racism courses should be given when you're teaching customer service, right? Because within our programs where we're being educated to become librarians, there's racism. And so we start there. It still starts in the curriculum. As Taina mentioned, in the books, it starts there. So that's where the change really needs to come in, because librarians coming out of school are oblivious. A lot of them are oblivious, and they don't know that they're bringing this with them to the world, to the field. So if we want to start someplace where we can really make an impact, it really should start in the programs, in the LIS programs.
But I also want to think about the African proverb, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, you go together.
Yep. And
that's why, going together might be the rate at which the non-BIPOC community can stand. And as much as we can say that, this needs to be implemented right now, in order to make the appropriate change and long-lasting change, we have to be a part of committee work. We have to be the stakeholders that are in those discussions and in the room. And we have to avail ourselves to some of the inquiries that they may have. It does start with, library school students and letting them know that the work continues once they get that degree. But it is a bottom-up approach. It's a top-down approach. It's so many entry points into the anti-racism work. It's hard, as an individual librarian, to just sit and say, here's where it needs to happen. Because some of these directors, I feel like a lot of the directors and CEOs, many of them have just gotten into the position, and many of them are not even librarians. So you're trying to teach the importance of how to feel valuable as a librarian to someone who's coming from private sector, who's coming from education, who's coming from art, the field of art and philanthropy work. And so we mentioned about language. Language really is our strength. I think about James Baldwin. I think about Lorraine Hansberry. I think about our leaders and our librarians of color who have really led frameworks. It really, we need to go together. But unfortunately, I have, from my own understanding, because I know I'm not exempt from the feelings that come up when I talk about race relations and the institutional and systemic toll within the profession. I just think that it's very important that I know that I need to bring and incorporate the views of non-person of color, because they make the decisions, we all working together, like, you know, 2 years from now, it's not going to say like, you know, we change everything for Black librarians. We have our counterpart, our Hispanic counterpart, because I do identify as Afro-Latina. We have our Asian counterpart who has experienced COVID-19 related discrimination. We all need to work together, but it definitely starts by changing perspectives.
I so much agree with you, and I want just to add that when you say we have to work together, you are so right. This is going to take a give and take understanding from both sides, from all sides. This is nothing. This is not something that happened overnight. This has been going on since we came on the shores of this nation. It's ingrained in our Constitution. It's ingrained in our multimedias. It's ingrained in our daily lives. It's something that's going to have to be eradicated over time. But right now we recognize that it's here. We have the ear of a lot of people of power. Now that we have that ear, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to say it? The way we did things in the 60s may not work for the 2000s. We have to keep the same tenacity that they had, but we have to use the tools that we have today to fight this animal called racism. I'm really excited about it. In the past, there's been flash in the pans. Rodney King, Trayvon Martin, they've been flashing the pans as far as demonstrations has gone on. But right now, this is going on for 3 to 4 weeks now. This is not a flash in the pan. This is a sign of the times. This revolution is televised. This revolution is being caught on webcam. This revolution is being caught on video. This revolution is breaking news, and this revolution is going to go on. It is going to bring about a change. It's going to bring about the complete change that we need. That remains to be seen.
Thank you so much, panelists. We still have an hour. I had one more question before we go to the chat. Is it all right if I ask you?
Sure.
Or do you want to? Okay, thank you so much. I mean, we've kind of been discussing it, and I know that what we've been saying is that so many librarians of color do not have the power. It's really the white people at the top. But I'm wondering what you think about what steps that we can take to increase diversity in libraries. Is it recruitment of BIPOC at a young age? Is it mentorship programs? Is it scholarships? I mean, how do you think that we can increase diversity in libraries, or is it really just talking to people in power to convince them to hire us?
It's all of the above that you just mentioned. It's really, my thing is, I'm a real, as working in public libraries and working in academic libraries, I see that, as Richard said, it's the support staff. So years ago, the 3 big systems in New York City all had scholarship programs that helped individuals become librarians. Those programs have gone by the wayside. They're no longer there, right? At the rising cost of tuition that is happening in higher ed, I'm a fan of badges. So if you had, I just read recently that was passed into that President Trump put into law that you no longer need education for certain jobs for the federal government jobs. Like, he just changed legislation in that. That was done really, people are still looking at COVID. I'm looking at your face and be like, what? This really happened? Yeah, it's an article. I fact checked it. It was in the Washington Times. And it goes to show that, skills, so that, there are a lot of jobs are looking at education and training. So I feel that support staff, you have clerks, that new librarians, new supervisors as librarians will come into public libraries and academic libraries, and the clerk is the one who trains the person to do their job working within the system. And oftentimes these clerks are people of color, and they never get recognized for knowing the business. So why not, if they know the business, why not promote them, and, make 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 I'm not saying change our MLS requirements, but there in certain states there are bachelor's programs that allow individuals to become librarians. Why not do it back? Go back. What happened to the training and development departments that were at every department, at every part of our world that we live in? Training and development. It used to be you had an onboarding process. It would take two weeks. You go through this whole onboarding process. No more is that. You're given a little box and saying that's your cubicle, and they send you off to your cubicle. Now we have a chance to revisit what education really looks like in the field of librarianship because of remote work. So how do we bring about promoting support staff? Because there are a ton of qualified support staff that can totally run a library system. As Richard said, he was a janitor. He had to go to school. He went to school. He received his degree, and he became a director. There are support staff that may not want to be a director, but would love to have the recognition that a librarian receives, opposed to saying, "Oh, you're just a clerk." Right?
So that is excellent, Sandra. So one of the things that I look at is we are Black librarians of color, Black people and librarians of color. We have to look at ourselves as the Harriet Tubmans of librarianship.
Gotcha.
Harriet Tubman took people from slavery to freedom. She didn't take 2,000, 3,000. She took 10, 20, 3, 4 at a time. And that's what we have to do. So as a director of a library, what I do is I find librarians of color and I say, what do you know about that circulation desk, which is the heart of the library? So on Saturdays, I get librarians of color, young librarians of color, and I said, come over to my library on Saturday, and I'm gonna teach you how to run reports, how to run that circulation desk, how to do interlibrary loans, stuff that you really don't learn in school, stuff that you're only gonna learn if someone says to you, come, let me teach it to you. And so that's what I do. I take my people in the Pittsburgh area, librarians, and I bring them to my library on Saturday or in the evening, and I said, we're going to teach you how to do interlibrary loans, holds, all of these things that are done on that computer by mostly white staff sometimes. And once you know that, now those are your freedom papers in the librarian world. Those are your freedmen papers. And so that's what I do. So what I'm saying is, when we are in positions to teach and to train, we need to teach and to train to bring our people out of the doldrums, to bring them into the light of librarianship.
So I have a myriad of ways of answering that question. I recognize that a lot of us want to feel that diversifying the workforce starts at the MLS level and the library school level, and I'm an adjunct professor. But if we don't change the way the courses are taught, then we're not preparing those librarians for the institutional work that needs to happen. So I don't think my MLS program offers implicit bias learning opportunities or microaggression learning opportunities, or even how to deal with the content of race within a book discussion or with patrons. I don't know, is the academic track, the law librarian track, or the public librarian track, if they really incorporate that, right? You get collection one-on-one. You get reference, reader's advisory. I know you get outreach, which talks about vulnerable population. Some may even talk about accessibilities, but there isn't anything that really explicitly talks about this race work. So we need to restructure our MLS program. Then the institution. I do agree with Sandra and Richard. We need to engage the staff that's currently there, because what is the point of preparing a workforce to be put into a profession in where they're going to constantly come against the challenges that everyone in this panel has experienced, and possibly the people in the chat force, in the chat room. So we don't start building the capacity around our staff, those new MLS students are going to be stuck at the librarian level, and they're not going to see the light of directorship, because we haven't created, as Richard said, like Harriet Tubman, we haven't really created that pipeline to leadership. and there isn't a pipeline for us, right? Because we're dealing with structures that are in place. So, we can diversify the profession from that base, but we need to have structures in the top that include the voices that are going to make the changes, and that's going to systemize the pipeline for those MLS students. Because I don't want to be in a position where I'm selling someone in my community a pipe dream and saying, go into librarianship, you're making good money, but then they're going to treat it like any other city job. You just get union benefits and health benefits. That's not why I got into librarianship. I got into librarianship to make sure that I'm providing the right information to that right person. I am in love with reference questions. I am in love with doing social justice and racial literacy, and where I'm letting individuals know that they can tell their stories, that they can write books, that they can know that the library is there for them. Well, I'm coming from older adults, so I'm passionate about that, but letting them know that they can come as a place of engagement, as a place for civic discourse, as a place for community involvement. And to do those ideals and the values that we have in librarianship, and some may call it vocational art, but that's what I was drawn to. I just don't want to tell somebody to come in there. Sorry, working from home, so you hear my children. I don't want anyone to just come into this work, but I haven't worked with BACLA or Reforma or COPLA or any of others to kind of create these pipelines and systematically put that in there so that it becomes ALA policy or becomes NILA policy or becomes policy somewhere else. We need to advance race, equity, and inclusion as a profession, and then it will be that much easier. There wouldn't be so much of a lift when you're asking these MLS students to come into the profession. It will be common practice.
I agree.
My laptop was dying.
I agree with everything that's been said. Do you guys can I go to the chat now?
You sure can.
That chat is
Yep.
so lovely. I'm loving it.
It is a lot in the chat.
Do they unmute themselves too? I'm sorry, I've never been on Blue Jeans before.
People can unmute themselves. I just going through.
So someone's talking about the diversity of the board. So important.
Yes.
So important that the board is diversified. You cannot have I mean, that goes with in Black communities also. There should be no one board that's the same. I'm just blown away how some communities are with African Americans and Black people in it. Board of trustees are all white.
Also, board of trustees in some areas are volunteer opportunities. So just like you recruit an MLS student, you would have to recruit a board director of a community of color. And just knowing that I'm on a board, a lot of individuals who are on the board have an aside. They have their job. Some are appointed by elected officials. So that's also having a conversation with your elected officials to diversify who's on that board. I know some works with school boards. I know the appointments are made from the county mayor. All of those discussions will have to be like a systemized and an organized approach. We talk about what does organization look like. It's not the same organization as the 60s and the 70s. Organization is strategic, and if you want your board to be diversified, then you have to talk to your elected officials and make sure those appointments reflect the demographic that there have a fiduciary responsibility to govern. But for those of you who are going to ask more questions about that, I'll wait.
Oh, and the board, yeah. I would just like to add about board trustee level. To get at the table, sometimes some boards are not, appointed by the elected officials. There are also boards that you can actually get on it, in terms of, drawing from my experience in philanthropy and fundraising, junior boards allow younger people to get on the board. and to have a seat at the table too. So perhaps creating junior boards in some levels with the Board of Trustees may help as well.
Mm-hmm.
Amelia had a question. What would be the most helpful things that white allies can do to help? People did respond to her about speaking up, but I didn't know if any of the other panelists had something to respond.
See something, say something. If you see your counterparts doing something racist or something that's not proper, bad jokes, micromanaging, marginalizing, say something. Pull that person's coat as to what's going on. People
Yeah,
of
there's
color.
a
Go ahead, honey.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was gonna say there's a lot of resources of how to really like get involved with anti-racism work, but one of the things that allyship can look like, and depends on where the level that you're at, right? If you know that your library deals with funders that promotes a racist view, then you need to solicit and write grants to funders who kind of have the values that you want to instill in your library, right? Or you can solicit and ask for some of those funding requests from there. If you are a frontline level librarian and you see that someone has racially harassed your colleagues, then allyship looks like bystandership. And getting familiar with what those bystandership trainings look like and asking your institution to promote more robust bystander training so that you can be there for your colleagues when they're going through that, if they have to experience that. Nobody wants to go to work dealing with that either. And also educating, right? Showing up for racial justice. What does that look like? Providing those resources to the public, printing them out, putting flyers, having them available. I mean, right now we're closed, so many of us are closed. I don't know which region of New York you are, but there is so much opportunities to have collective work to create these LibGuides. I mean, there's LibGuides on Instagram. Like, there's so many curated resources in order to really kind of figure out what allyship can look like from a white perspective. And how you can support your colleagues, and also taking the time to listen to what your colleagues need. Sometimes we don't need someone to jump in there. We need you to listen and hear the experience, because our experiences are so different. You might not have seen that someone took my idea, and you may not have seen that I was skipped over for a promotion, or that I wasn't offered the same as my counterpart. But if you took the time to listen and understand that this is actually happening, that that the libraries are not a neutral space in this area of respect, that can go a long way in collectively coming up with some solutions that we can propose to management together.
Yes. Agreed. Everyone's story is different. As someone put in about the one person that gets to be a part of the elite club. It may be that one person, like everyone, you have introverts and extroverts. Most people who are extroverts, they know how to work a room and get inside there. Introverts know how to work a room too. But understanding diversity comes in all forms. Like, people's personalities need to be taken into consideration. I'm just a proponent of education. Education is powerful, whether it be formal education or informal education. Reading through some of the chat here, I noticed that there's a lot of opportunity for informal education. Someone posted something about becoming, people of color on boards, that it's hard to get to be on boards. First and foremost, I would not have been able to be on a board or understand a board if it wasn't for my high school English teacher. She saw where I was great with debating, but I didn't want to be an attorney. So she introduced me to nonprofit organizations that she was a part of. And she took me along with her to board meetings that I was able to understand what volunteerism is. Volunteers in communities of color is not something people have, they don't think they have time for it because they don't see the value in it, because the value has not been taught. The value in our community that's taught is get out, get a job, go to work, make your money, as Taina said, get a city job, or, become a unionized member, and you're set for life with your career. There's more to work than that. A lot of my experiences, a lot of my opportunities came from my volunteerism, from me getting out there, being a part of a board, being a part of our state and our, as Taina says, our national organizations. But again, if people don't understand the value of this And everyone thinks that the way society had it set up for so many years is that go to school, get a job. No, volunteerism can help take your career to the next level. But if it's not taught and it's not made available where someone can see the value in it, then they will never understand what my role could be as a member of a board of a trustees to have a seat at the table. So that's why those few that do make it through those golden gates in the ivory tower is because they understood someone stopped and taught them. And as Richard said, go back as Harriet Tubman and bring somebody along. I'm always teaching. I'm always available to teach and offer and give advice. And, just don't call me and tell me you're coming to pick my brain and we're having a great time. Just say, hey, we're going to have a brainstorming session and I am with you. I am there. Because I've invested a lot in myself to get to where I am. Self-education is very powerful. But having a seat at these tables, you have to be willing and open to learn. And so I still say informal learning will always, trump formal learning. And that's what happens. That's where your staff is at, in the trenches, right? They're in the trenches because they had a lot of informal learning. The staff that can become the people of color, the staff members that are there that can be promoted. I saw in the chat about the price of the education of an MLS. The price of a college degree, not just an MLS, anything past a bachelor's today, the price of the education is going up exponentially. So what can we do? How can we advocate with schools? Schools are business. How do we get the systems to realize that they can promote and give people more responsibility based on their experiences? And I'll leave it right there.
So I want to say that volunteerism is really something that helped my career. I volunteered to be on a lot of committees. I volunteered to be the president of the Black Caucus in New York. I volunteered to be the president of the Black Caucus American Library Association. We just formed recently, if you're reading the newspaper, the problems that they're having in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. We just formed the Black Caucus of Pennsylvania, volunteered to be on that. I'm on multiple EDI committees, which are so lost. These EDI committees are so lost, but you have to be on that. You have to be a part of the solution. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so life isn't always about getting paid for doing something. You have to volunteer. You have to get out there and fight for the cause and fight for your beliefs. That being said, someone said, Donna said, when you speak up, you have to speak up professionally, and that's don't let them take you there. They will take you there. They will take you to snapping your head and tapping your finger. They will take you there, but you cannot let them take you there, because once you let them take you there, like we were talking about earlier, they become the victim. The way you spoke to me, I've never had anyone speak to me that way before. I mean, meanwhile, you have just laid down the biggest racist track I've ever seen. But now that I get with you, as we say, now you're the victim. And so you have to, this is a slippery slope. We're going to learn as we go along in this process. But the good thing is that we are here. Don't let them go. When I say don't let them go, don't let the topic die down. Keep this topic on the burners. Don't be afraid to make someone uncomfortable. Because a lot of times you're like, well, I don't want to say, it's an uncomfortable situation. If you ever sit down in a chair sometime, a couch or seat, or get in the bed, sometimes it feels uncomfortable. But you have to move around until you keep moving around and you keep moving around till that bed or that couch is comfortable. That's how this is. You have to keep moving around. You have to keep pressing on things and picking that pillow up and hitting that pillow till they get it just right to make it comfortable. And that's how this racism is. You have to and people not being comfortable with the conversation. I am so sick of people calling me. And so that's what you have to do. Don't worry about people being comfortable. We don't care if people are comfortable or not. We care if you understand what racism is and how to eradicate racism from this profession called librarianship. And once we get that, then we can get that into our communities. It's gonna morph. I have to find the charger. I'm like Michelle.
I found mine already. It was right next to me.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think
Richard stepped away from it to go get his charger.
I mean, I think Richard's correct that, you know, we have to have these uncomfortable conversations, and also that it's not our job to make people comfortable. I think just by having these conversations, we are fighting the good fight. And so even just that's why I wanted to have this panel, because I'm really devoted having these conversations and trying to bring people together to talk about diversity. I think just by hopefully talking about it, we can convince people to hire more people, have more diversity in libraries. Let me go to the chat and see.
Mine's went
Taina,
like
you
4
wrote-
times. I don't know how it happened. I'm having trouble with my chat. That's why I said if someone can unmute themselves, because it's hard for me with the chat. Sorry.
You don't have to write. You can just say it.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
You can instead of like responding
Yeah.
to people in the chat, you can say it. But I think that's a great
Okay.
idea. Yeah, if you want to repeat that, if you want to voice it about
Yeah, I
having
would
the board action
right.
plan.
The
Yeah.
board can hold the director accountable by just having like an EDI plan or equity action plan. And then, you know, it will be responsibility of the institution to kind of have those statistics. So it could be like evidence-based. I know PLA is really big on that. And then, you know, seeing what the impact is with the community of color, and then have some like quantifiable, changes that they can see, especially when we talk about language. Like it's enough to say something that impact, but if you have managers that are more numbers based and want to see like charts and want to see like where movement is, or some people are a lot more visual. So kind of think of alternate strategies that can kind of speak to the different learning styles and the different management styles of who you're working with within your institution. So some may be visual, some may be audible, some may be the written statement. So having all of that in your tool belt in terms of speaking truth to power is something that you should consider. And in addition to what I think Sandra put in about some emotional intelligence training, so that you can get some clarity on how to like address the work.
No, I think that's a great idea, because I think that so many of us have been trying to have these conversations, but what we lack is a plan for to achieve actionable change. Because, you know, I don't think that we can take another like more years of this where, you know, we go to ALA again and we hear them give another speech about, okay, this is, you know, like, you know, this tiny percentage of librarians of color. Because I remember being at YSS one year and just seeing that graphic of, you know, just the tiny few librarians of color, and I was just so disturbed by that. And I was like, you know, this needs to change. And, you know, but it was like there was no plan from them. And I'm like, well, if you're so disturbed by this and I'm so disturbed by this, like, where's your plan? Because I just feel like it's always on us to change it. And as we've said before on the panel, we don't have the plan. So I really like the idea from you, Taina, about the plan.
Yeah, because analysis can transform service design, right? Like we use that to say, this is, you know, in library school, I know in my class, I said you use census data to kind of figure out what your communities are, what language they speak, how do you kind of cater to this group, and what programs that we should create. But, you know, we need to do an internal analysis as well, at least for a benchmark.
Yep.
Exactly. Are there any more questions from attendees? You can either write them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask. or if your question, if you already wrote the question in the chat and it wasn't answered, if you want to unmute and ask it.
Hi, this is, I'm sorry I came late. My name is Juanita. And I wanted to ask, well, not ask a question, but get some feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I'm a very vocal and I'm very strong in my stance in what I believe in. And then sometimes people take it as, how would I put it? You're too aggressive. The normal micro, microaggressions and things like that. How can you relate to someone? No, I'm not being microaggressive. I'm not being hostile. I'm not being that. But what I am telling you is this, and this. This is what's bothering me. This is what do I need to get you to understand that this is going on, and you choose not to see it, or you choose to ignore it. How do you deal with those type of situations?
Okay, first
And
of all, let me just say you have a lot of nerve thinking that this is what they're thinking. You have a lot of nerve, you angry black woman,
yes,
talking about what you don't like. First of all, you need to stay in your place. Okay,
right.
you need to stay in your place. And oh my God, you said that to me. Now I don't understand why you so upset with me. Uh, keep on keeping on, my
I
sister.
got a lot of those.
Keep on,
I got a
keep
lot
on
of
keeping
those.
on. Time is changing. It's going to change. Those very people who are talking about you. How can you say that? You're angry. Why are you upset? I don't understand you. It doesn't call for that. Oh, calm down. All of those things uh, are tools to control you. Are tools
Mm-hmm.
to throw you off your game and take the focus off of what's important. What's important is what you're telling them is how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And it's
um,
also that level of understanding, right? When I mentioned earlier, there isn't like this shared language of what implicit bias is and what those outwardly biases are. And so when you're coming from two diverse viewpoints, it's easy for someone to just say, well, you're fitting this stereotype that I have in my mind, and I'm outwardly saying that those you're demonstrating those stereotypes. And again, because there's structural racism that exists, it's easy to say, well, it could be apparent that this individual, even though they're displaying this stereotypical behavior that is accused by someone else, there isn't a system of accountability to make sure that those EDIs are fair. Like the way that we evaluate those things are fair. Like how Sandra mentioned earlier, when you have like the credentials put up against each other, there isn't things that are in place that can foster a more inclusive workforce that don't perpetuate those stereotypes and won't say, well, she's angry rather than she's really expressive. And that's where I said that, institutions need to model those equity in leadership so that they can be objectionable when they're negotiating and they're mitigating those kinds of conflicts.
I would like to add to that, there are courses that I've taken personally that helped me along the way in this career. I've been studying emotional intelligence, as a professor. This is some of the research that I'm doing on my own, emotional intelligence and Black individuals. And in addition to that, also having business etiquette courses. Business etiquette is not taught in librarianship. It's not taught in the MLS program. So that's something that you have to go out and get on your own. And what it means is that sometimes you may be in a space and you can be very passionate about what you want to say, but there's, grandma always taught me there's a time and a place for everything, right? And to be heard, sometimes you have to be seen and not heard, but then you also need to be seen and heard at the same time. So having the tools that can equip you to know how to navigate the spaces that you're in, it's called reading the room. Oftentimes you can be very passionate about things, but if you don't read the room, your voice will never be heard. So how do you read the faces in that room? So, having those tools and taking these extra courses, for me personally, helped me become a better leader. And becoming a leader is investment in yourself. It's taking a hard, and I'm a proponent of always saying, take a hard look at yourself. I love that song, Michael Jackson song, The Man in the Mirror, because you have to look at the person in the mirror. If you can't look yourself in the face and tell yourself all that you love and like and adore about yourself, don't expect it from anybody else. And if you can't tell yourself about your flaws, what are the things that you feel like you might be lacking in? Everyone has something that you may feel that you're lacking in. But if you cannot have a wholehearted, honest conversation with yourself, don't look for it from somebody else. So, and you look at psychology, that's where the id, the ego, the superego, and all those things coming into play. But if you can look at yourself wholeheartedly and have that wholehearted conversation with yourself, like say, what are my gaps? We all have them. What can I improve on? Because everyone can improve on something in their life. That makes it far more better for yourself. And that's just my personal opinion and how I feel about how do you end racism. We can't end a system that's already been in place for so many years, but how can we continue to make people feel uncomfortable? Understand what makes you uncomfortable. And then you can also go from that point as well.
Thank you, Sandra. We have another question from Lori Needle. Can you address the issue of how non-professional experience is undercredited, paid, and not recognized on civil service exams? It impacts all of us, and especially librarians of color who may have worked in a non-professional capacity for longer.
I am not a proponent of civil service exams. They are skewed. They they are racist. Nassau County have a civil service exam. Ridiculous.
It creates homogeneous communities.
Yes.
Thank you, my sister. Right on. Suffolk County has a civil service exam. They're the gatekeepers of racism.
But that's like someone just put in the chat, like the SATs, the IQ test. These examinations have been put in place by people of power, the people with the 1% with the money. Because if you look at by individuals, we were told you need a degree. Now that so many people have terminal degrees, now they're saying, oh, the terminal degree is not really worth it if you have an EDD versus if you have a PhD. What's the difference, in that? Basically, how I look at it and why I'm no longer in my EDD program is that if I'm going to write a book for a grade, I don't need to write a book for a grade. I'd rather write a book and be able to share my knowledge with others and also be able to compensate it for it. Because once I write that book for the terminal degree, it is not my book anymore. It's property of the institution that has granted me those letters. So the letters that I want to give myself is me by me. I do not feel as though I want to have those letters. They're needed, yes, for some people, but I've seen too many people navigate through the systems without having those letters behind their name, and they're a lot stressed. They live a lot. Their life is less stressful, and they're much more happier. So I decided that I'm going to do that in my own terms. But the civil service is something that has been in place for years. The system is flawed. We need to get civil rights attorneys on this,
exactly,
and the laws need to be changed. That's where the civil service exams are going to change from. You need attorneys on our side. We need to get civil rights attorneys, because somewhere written in that civil rights exam, the testing is some language. And again, we got to go back to what we said earlier. Language is powerful. Language to keep people marginalized. So we need to find that language and have that language change. And then that in turn comes from having attorneys present to break down the language.
And that's something that the Black Caucuses and other ethnic organizations will have to band together and do.
Exactly. And find us a powerhouse civil rights attorney to find embedded in that civil rights exam, that one word that will be able to make the difference to abolish those exams, because they are skewed and they disproportionate people of color, because it's language. Again, everything is language. It's how you write your resume. for the civil rights exam, the test. It doesn't match the job skills that's there, but it's what your resume has inside of it. So it's just like now you have, it's now that you have, you have applicant tracking systems. You're applying for a job online. When you apply for that job online, if you don't have words from that JD, the job description, embedded throughout your resume, not just in one job, in one platform experience, your resume will never reach a live person's hand. It will never leave what we call the black hole, because the computer system is looking for these words. And I totally agree. Claudia just put in the chat that she says Nyla's definitely working on that issue. I'm very happy to know that. And Grace asked, has anyone done some research on the civil service exam? There has been some research that I know some librarians in like Westchester, and also librarians, especially out in Nassau County, they've been looking at it, but I don't think anyone delved deep into taking a look at the exam itself and breaking the exam apart. And
I know that Nyla, years ago, we Black Caucus American Library Association and New York Black Library Caucus, years ago we approached Nyla about the Nassau County Civil Service exam on behalf of the Black librarians and support staff out there. And Jeremy had promised to take up that mantle, and I believe he has. Long and arduous process. Nassau County has a powerful political machine. So it's gonna take some time. The covers have to be pulled off of that system.
Right. And then you have to also think about which system, right? Because the judicial librarians exam for the city, I know in order to be a municipal librarian for the municipal archives, you need to take the civil service exams. So when you start looking at the civil service exam, you got to really like break down and analyze those numbers for which systems that and which counties that you're going to target and kind of change. So yeah, like everyone said, it's going to be a lot of groundwork, but I think it's also necessary work, especially if, some of the questions were written before computers. Like, it's just not.
The exam is scored by state guidelines. So again, we need an attorney.
The state librarian needs to be a part of this as well. And that person, New York State librarian, was recently appointed, like maybe 6 months ago.
Someone put in the chat they were angry that time spent running programs in the team room wasn't counted. Again, it's the State Library Association. The word. As we said it all along, language is powerful. I believe that the wording in the State Library Association, with how they scale and how they grade the exam, is antiquated. It doesn't like, everyone's changing their bylaws now, right? Everyone's running to change their bylaws and say video conference meetings are acceptable. Your vote does count if you're in a video conference. Bylaws are being changed, so state laws need to be changed to look at where the world we live in today. The world we have today will never ever look like the world we had yesterday.
Hopefully,
I think Iman raised her hand.
Yes, thank you, Taina. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just, I initially raised my hand in response to Michelle mentioned taking like business etiquette course in order to empower herself. And then we're talking about, just systemic oppression in general. And I'm just curious who's responsible? Is it the system that we're operating in? So our employers or the state or the city, are they responsible for arming us with the tools that we need in order to bring us to the quote unquote standard level? Or is it something that we as BIPOC just have to do on our own and reach out to those who need it and provide those services for us?
So Iman, I utilize my research skills. A lot of the courses that I've taken on my own did not come from the field of librarianship. They came from outside fields where you can take a workshop here for free, or someplace else. They came from other associations. That because I realized I'm a career changer. So I realized early on in changing my career, becoming into the field of librarianship, that a lot of gaps were there as far as it being a business. It wasn't really treated as a business. It's treated as a science. And what is the science of business? So I went out personally and took the courses on my own. Some I paid for. I would scour the internet and find somebody that was offering something for $99 or something for $49.99. And, it's an investment in myself. But I do remember when I was at Queens Library, they did pay for, and some library systems have paid for the post-MLS, in public librarianship. It really depends on what's going on with the budgets, and our budgets come from the state. So I would say personally, what I would do if I was in your situation, if it's something that I wanted to do, is that seek out the free courses, the free programs that you can avail yourself to. Right now, we're home. There are a lot of free courses. Like, MOOCs came out 12, 13, 14 years ago. MOOCs came out, massive open online courses. Everyone said that they wouldn't survive. There's so many massive open online courses. There's so many MOOCs out here that you can get and take on your own for free. Even if Coursera is offering one and you can't pay for it, they also have a scholarship with their program with availing yourself to MOOCs. I've taken a lot of my business courses through Coursera. Some of them were free of charge when they first started. Now they're not free of charge, but you can apply for their scholarships. So it's really empowering yourself. Because you can't.
But do you think that as a Black member of a Black organization, and I'm including myself, that we have some responsibility to spread that word and provide those resources so that there's a centralized place or there's somewhere that people can go, staff who do want to move up professionally can say, well, what can I do? Where do I go? How do I help myself?
Yes. So BCALA, I know that back in August, BCALA, not August, back in April, they offered May. They had a symposium, and it was a summit, and it was great. It was free education there. A lot of people came and availed themselves from the listserv. So your membership now for some of the Black organizations, you don't even have to be a member for some of them. I know at NYBLC, there's a lot talks are going on about offering like lunch and learn, because we realize that there are gaps and people need this secondary education, but it's not affordable for many people. So we do know that those gaps are there and people are listening and paying attention. So I would say that moving forward is a good thing for NYBLC is now part of NYLA, and being a part of NYLA, there are some things that the current president and even the new administration that will come in November are thinking about lunch and learn, and that you'll be able to go out and, get this education. And, I'm looking at badges myself personally, being that I don't work at a library system per se, and I see this, and as Richard said, being able to help for people as Harriet Tubman, I'm looking at badges and creating my own courses online. So that's something that I might be doing in the near future. But, it all takes time. But I would say I avail myself to those things. If you want to find out what were some of the courses that I took on Coursera, my email address, I'm putting it in the chat for you right now. You can shoot me an email and I can shoot you a list of the courses that I took via Coursera.
Yeah, but I think that's something to say, that there's there were talks earlier about having and diversifying the profession, but then here's the gap, the skill set gap, and where after that person graduates, they don't know what tools they need to kind of, continue on. And there's like CCE credits that talks about the effects of like virtual story time or programming, things like that. But what are some of the professional development opportunities that if it isn't shared amongst those self-proclaimed Harriet Tubman folks, like how do we make sure? No, you're sharing, but I'm just saying, like, how do we ensure that the gap is met from the incoming class? And they feel that they too are supported, right? So, again, there's work all around. And like I know it's kind of easy to identify that it comes from the top within the institution, but it also is horizontal, it's hierarchical, it's vertical, it's diagonal. It's so many
Real
ways.
service.
It's 360. It's so many ways. Yeah.
I think this is why, can I just say, I think this is why mentorship is so important. And I
Yes.
feel like so many library workers of color, librarians of color, they don't get mentored. Um, and this is why, like with the coalition, my goal with that was to create a mentorship program, which I did because I wanted to make sure that within the coalition, everyone got mentored. And so I just did like the first group of matches. And Sandra, you're a mentor. And also, I was lucky enough that Sandra, I feel like you've been mentoring me. Like you asked me to join the NYBLC, and now I'm like the incoming president and for that organization. And I feel like when librarians of color, library workers of color, we are mentored, like we can do great things. But otherwise, because of the way that we are treated within librarianship, we get pushed out. But when we are mentored, we feel like, okay, I know I can succeed because here's someone who is like me and I see them succeed. So I feel like mentorship is just so important. And also that's why I'm great to be part of, the committees as well. Sorry, Sandra, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I said it's the virtuous cycle, and I have to pay homage to Richard Ashby Jr., who mentored me and held my hand while I was president of NYBLC. He fostered he just gave so much great insight and like, okay, this is what you might not want to say as president, but you might want to say it to your board, and I am indebted to Richard's candor and his experience and just helping me become a better person. So that's why I live my life to continue the virtuous cycle. And that's what I do. Anybody come across my path, if I can say, well, you know what, I think I might know this, but let me double check it and I'm gonna send it to you. And I just reach out and I give back that way.
Thank you, Sandra. And also, you've been a big help and a plus in my life also. I want to say that we just formed the Black Caucus of Pennsylvania Library Association, and there's a lot of training that needs to be done there with the support staff and with the professional staff. So what we're getting ready to do is make a big announcement today or tomorrow that for 1 year we're giving away free membership to the organization.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we're
Great.
giving away free membership to the organization, and the reason we were able to do that because the Black Caucus of American Library Association gave some of our affiliates some monies, and so the Black Caucus fed into the affiliates, and so now the affiliates are going to feed back into the membership and the potential membership. So Pennsylvania Black Librarians Caucus is opening up our membership free to all librarian workers, support staff, and professional staff for 1 year membership. And we plan on giving robust webinars and training people, and in hope that they'll see the value in belonging to a professional organization.
Thanks, Rebecca. I just read in the chat from Rebecca.
And thank you,
Of course, I
Peyton.
just wanted to
Thank
let
you,
everybody
Peyton.
know.
Oh, Rebecca's talking now. Hi, Rebecca.
Sorry, I keep trying to unmute myself and not getting it. But yeah, just wanted to share that really quickly that I got involved with the New York Black Librarians Caucus before I even finished with my master's. And from the very beginning, Michelle was the president at the time, and she kind of took me under her wing, and she really helped guide me through getting my master's. And in that time, she helped me get 2 scholarships, a NILA award, and I mean, I know that I can text or call her any time with any question, and she means it when she says it, to like reach out to her, ask her questions. If she can do anything for you, she will, and she has proven that in the last 3 years that I've known her. So I just wanted to let everybody know that and publicly say thank you, and let you know that I really, really appreciate you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Oh, I have a typo, spelling typing too fast. I put in the chat, for those of you who are confused, my mother named me Sandra Michelle, and she called me by both names, so I use both names interchangeably, and I have a spelling error there because I was typing fast.
I also want to thank Richard and Sandra and Emily, everybody, for just their time that they avail themselves to me, and all my questions and all my resources that I'm constantly throwing your way and trying to flesh out ideas and figure things out. I was looking forward to going to Tulsa this year,
I know.
But
we'll
next
see you
year's
next
100th
year.
anniversary. Next year's 100th anniversary of the Tulsa riot, so we are going to show up and
Wait a
be
minute
counted.
now. Also, this year is the 50th anniversary for New York Black Librarians Caucus and the 50th anniversary for the Black Caucus of American Library Association. And
Yep.
we're hoping to see everybody in November. We're hoping to get there in November.
Prayerfully, but the way our governor's talking about going back down to phase 2 again, because people are out in the streets, gallivanting like there's no tomorrow. So I'm prayerfully that the gala can happen. I am praying that it will happen. But, I would be remiss also not to thank my esteemed panel and our great moderator, Emily, for putting this together. This was awesome. I'm glad to have been a part of it. I'm glad to be able to share with people who I don't know that are out here in Cyberland right now viewing us. This was great, and I look forward to doing it again.
But who's the next president of the Black Caucus in New York?
Voting is going on right now, but the way it looks, we have 14 more days. Emily is running unopposed, so it will be Emily Daly.
Woo-hoo-hoo! That's
Looking
wonderful.
at the chat. Look at the chat, blown
The
up.
chat's like blowing up right now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank this panel. Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you, Taina. Thank you, Sandra. You're all wonderful. And just, I think we had an amazing conversation. And thank you so much for volunteering. I know that you're all so busy. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all.
Emily, if you need anything,
thank you.
Give me a call. I'm at your beck and call.
And the work doesn't stop.
Anybody gives you any trouble, call me. I'm the bully. I'll take care of it all. Okay? You be president too, and let me be the thug for you guys. Okay?
He means that sincerely, Emily. He means that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. Oh my God, thank you.
So you don't have to take anything from anybody. Just send me an email or text, and I'll be the bad guy. Just say that Emily is so sweet, but the hitman she got is crazy.
Thank you. Oh my God, thank you.
Okay.
This was awesome.
So it's 12 o'clock?
Yes, it's 12 o'clock.
Oh, it's 12 o'clock.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I guess they want to know would the link be sent out with the video?
Yeah, let me ask Jen. Jen, are you still here? Jen Park?
Oh, absolutely. This was amazing.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. I didn't mean to call on you. I just will the link be okay. Thank you.
So I will I'm not even sure yet where the link will live, but I will send it out to all attendees, absolutely. As long as the panelists and the moderator are okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Can I have please?
What was that?
Could I have the link too, please?
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to stop the recording now and officially thank you so much.